Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. The soul of business is a fascinating, for me anyway, I'll just kind of own this. It's a fascinating way to look at how do you grow an organization. Because the soul and the way that we're working with it here has to do with it being that core, that kernel that gives life to the organization itself, that was kind of the generating spark, if you will, of literally any business on the planet. And that spark, if it doesn't get tended well, will tend to it will tend to go out. But if it's really tended to and paid attention to, you've got a pretty good shot of keeping things alive in the organization. And we're going to talk about aliveness here in this episode. My guest today is somebody that I've known for, coming up on 5 years now. Marina G is the founder of MG Media, an award-winning boutique agency in the Bay Area. And I've known her, like I said, for almost 5 years now, and it has been a working relationship. I first got wind of her, if you will, when I was doing some work with Mary Morrissey's organization, and I was involved with one of her virtual, and this is during the pandemic, virtual Dream Builder live sessions. And I was monitoring, and I was participating in a breakout session. And the two people that were in that breakout session, one of them was just going, rhapsodically, on and on and on about this woman that was doing amazing social media work for her and getting her. And it's kind of like, more I listened, the more intrigued I became, because, during the pandemic, backstory here for my company, 98% of our business disappeared overnight because most of it was, we're a consulting firm. And most of it was in-person consulting, and almost all of it was overseas, out of the U.S. So I had to pivot pretty quickly, and social media became one of the mechanisms by which that pivot was supposed to begin to happen. The unfortunate news was I didn't have a bloody clue how to start. That was not something that we'd ever paid some attention to. Most of our marketing almost all of our marketing was word of mouth, relationship referrals. And that was just not going to carry water going forward. So I got the phone number, and I called this delightful young woman up and had a great conversation. And I was truly impressed with what she was bringing to the table and how she positioned things. She's an incredibly experienced marketing professional, and she spent years working one-on-one with clients. And that was one of the things that I really appreciated, was the one-on-one personal touch. And I appreciated it because relationship is so, what's the word I'd use here? I mean, it is such an integral part of an organization's success, the quality and nature of relationship. And, those of you that have listened to the podcast have heard me talk about relationships in all of its varied forms. But, one of the things that happens here is relationship with strategy, not just interpersonal relationships. But one of the things that Marina brought to the table for me was the strategic look at how do we position what we're doing as a client. And that work has been evolving. What we started with has certainly, because I didn't have a social media presence, and now I do. It's not enormous, but I've got, far more followers now in different channels than I ever had before, because I had none. So, one more would have been 100% increase. But I've got a lot more than that. And Marina, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about her before I actually bring her on in a talking role here. But one of the things I've been fascinated with about her is the way that she actually balances her life. I mean, as a founder of an organization, one that is in a very high pressure environment, and in a sector by which you're judged by the results that you produce, and they're pretty immediate. I mean, you either hit the mark or you didn't hit the mark, and it's you can't sugarcoat it. It's the proof is in the numbers. So there's all that pressure that kind of goes on, and then the pressure of, as a founder, growing the organization. But she's managed also to keep alive another piece of her life, which is Latin dancing. I mean, she's an incredible dancer. She travels the world, both teaching and performing, and that creative juice, that creative spark, I know is ecumenical to her being able to actually continue to do what she does with the passion that she has. So, with that kind of a background in the introduction that I've got there, I want to just welcome to the show Marina G. How you doing, Marina?
I'm doing wonderful after that introduction. I think I'm going to record it and play it every morning when I wake up so I can feel ready for the day.
Yes, be my guest. Absolutely. Um, we found each other, like I said, in 2020. When did you actually found MG Media?
So I was, like you had mentioned, working one-on-one personal clients all around the Bay Area. Pandemic hit March of 2020. So I think it was March, 7th. It was the first week of March, I remember, because by the second week of March, I had lost every single contract that I had had. So that was when I started getting to work on what would become MG Media, and I officially, registered it and everything in September of 2020.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
when we started, you were just, really embryonic in
Yes.
the process.
I have to say, I think you were one of the first moving from Marina's clients to MG Media's clients.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
See, now that I didn't know. That's
Yeah.
I like being in the front end here. This is good. Yeah, the evolution, and this is the show's the soul of business, and like I said, it's part of the preamble and the introduction here. It's that kernel that that spark that provides the fuel for the organization's growth, and it's ideally it's generative. Um, but yeah, every organization goes through this where as they start building and they become successful, they get over the revenue hump and they actually start being able to hire people, and yeah, now it becomes how do we facilitate the business as we deliver who we are into the marketplace, and with that facilitating the business dynamic, it's real easy to lose connection in my experience with that that founding spark that made the organization itself possible. You've gone through a couple of different iterations, and I'm going to just kind of have you speak because you do a lot of work with organizations that are going through this as well. What are some of the things that and you can identify it with yourself, but I think also with your clients, what are some of the biggest challenges that you as an entrepreneurial founder have actually encountered? Both as you've grown your business, but also I think as importantly with the clients that you've worked with, because you've managed, and I'll speak for myself here, you've managed to keep us connected to the soul of who we are as we've pivoted, and everything was burning down around us. Yeah, yeah, you kept us focused. Um, so, what are some of the like I said, the top two or three biggest challenges that you have observed as organizations grow themselves as they keep themselves connected?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I feel really lucky about is that as I've been growing, so have my clients. And so most of the clients we have now are very long-term relationships, and where I was and where they were when we started are two completely different places than where we're both at now. And yet we're still aligned and working together and maintaining that relationship. So it's cool to not only have watched the own evolution of my own business, but also all my clients, like you're saying. Um, and I think there's a few main struggles that pop up both in my business and in clients. The first always being that I think a lot of people lose the idea that as you get bigger, you're still just working with people. Like like I just mentioned, oh, you went from being Marina's clients to MG Media's clients. You begin to feel like an entity, and you're working with bigger companies. You're putting their logos out. You're saying it's this agency working with this company, but at the end of the day, it's Marina on the Zoom call with the CMO or with the coach or the entrepreneur, whoever it is. And so coming back to what it is to have a relationship just person to person before our larger goals and everything is, I think, one of the things that's just allowed us to grow with our clients as we continue to evolve. And one of the biggest things that come up a lot with evolution is just changing the goal of what it is we're doing, where we're going. I like how you always use the phrase for the sake of what, and how that what often changes. So, as you were saying at the beginning of my business, for me, it was, getting some stable income. It was having the freedom to continue to follow the passions that I like to do. It was finding something that challenges me. And then, just like you mentioned, you start growing and you need to hire people. And now it's okay, how do we scale revenue? How do we increase profit margins, which was not anywhere on my mind when I first started. And then same thing for my clients as well. They start off wanting to open one more location, and all of a sudden they're trying to say, how do we acquire 5? So the ability to pivot teams and strategies for those changing what's
Mm-hmm.
has been both a challenge, but also I think one of the rewarding, fun aspects of owning a business. And it really kind of pulls out your skills as a leader and as a person, and your ability to connect with people and inspire people and get them behind a single vision. And it's something that you and I have talked about before. When I come to you and I say, Blaine, the vision's changed a little bit. How do I keep my people with me? How do I know if they're no longer aligned with it? That's for sure been one of the core learnings and evolutions.
Yeah. You went through my mastermind program
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years ago. And you mentioned leadership. How do you lead? And the maturation cycle as organizations grow, the skill set that needs to be brought to bear begins to shift
Mm-hmm.
for the leader as the organization grows. And what got me here won't get me there necessarily. To take a little bit of liberty with Marshall Goldsmith's phrase here. What have you noticed specifically with your own growth / maturation as a leader, from in these last 5 years, these last 4.5 years?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes entrepreneurship so scary, is because you constantly feel a little bit back at the beginning, a little bit of like, there are many things in life that are a little bit continuous. I feel like, for example, dance, when I train students, there are some things that it's just continue on this line, continue focusing on these things, and it will get you to where you want to go. And entrepreneurship and business growth isn't totally like that. You have to be on one line for a minute and then jump to another line you didn't even know was coming down the road. So I do think that's also what leads to a lot of uh, imposter syndrome, doubting yourself because you've never actually solved this problem that you're now being asked to solve. But what I've tried to find is the through line through all of those problems. And I think your work and the conversations we've had have really helped me figure that out, that even though fixing a team issue is different than a revenue issue, is different than a service delivery issue, at the end of the day, it's still me driving the ship. And what are the qualities and questions and ways I see people and our work that allow me to make the best decisions for all of those problems? What is the one thing that can blanket everything? And I think coming back to the soul of what we do and why we're doing it, and remembering that there's a essence to what we're doing, that there's a feeling that what you're doing needs to bring for both you and the people you're doing it with. And as soon as you start deviating from that is when you lose the way.
How do you define the soul of your business?
How do I define the soul of my business? The soul of my business is within the relationships of it. I would say it's the way a client feels and an employee feels and I feel at the end of the day after all of the conversations we've had, where we feel like it was a better journey because we did it together.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's a better journey because we did it together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That speaks very loudly about that relational dynamic. Yeah. And I can attest to that just in my work with you and your team. Wherever we've eventually ended up, I've always felt better about it because the journey was worth it. Now the results are going to be whatever the results are, but the journey was worth it. I learned something about me in the process, and I'm hoping that the team learned something about themselves in the process too. I mean, that
Yeah,
would be a
absolutely.
nice reciprocity if that was available. Um, the idea of personal touch, and this goes to the question of scaling.
Mm.
How do you manage, and what have you seen with clients, when scaling becomes part of the strategic initiative? They want to actually do something here, that move from one site to 5 locations, as you were talking about.
Mhm.
That personal touch that, and it's both outward and inward. The personal touch that you have with the clients themselves, but also keeping the personal touch with the employees as you onboard new people. How do
Mhm.
you keep them connected to the spirit of
Yeah,
what
we've
you're about?
gone through different sizes just within our agency as well. We've had bigger teams, smaller teams, more outsourced, more internal. So we've even within our own agency have gone through various setups, and I've watched my clients do the same. And I think it comes down to there's always key energy givers, I would say, in any kind of system. Everyone contributes energy to the system, but there are a few key people that sort of set what it is, set the vision of the direction of the strategy, set the culture into how we're going to get there. And I think business owners don't always pay as much attention to what it is they're setting. They kind of take a look at what everyone's giving back and say, oh, this is not working, that's not working. But what are you bringing to establish what people are bringing? So I've noticed that, especially in small teams, that one person that's not aligned with where we're going or the direction we're going
Mhm.
is enough, right? To to derail it. But it doesn't mean that that person um, isn't always a fit. Sometimes that's the case, that just journeys change and visions change and things like that. But other times I feel like it's really what the leader establishes, getting everyone on board. I think we keep too much to ourselves as entrepreneurs, leaders of marketing teams in general, where we have the vision and the plan and we're delegating and bringing people into the sphere of decision making while still understanding that you're the final decision. It's always kind of this balance. That's the thing I've noticed a lot, is this balance between, especially between, you want very autonomous, independent people, but then you need team players, and you want, um, just like that balance between going back and forth. So
Yeah.
bringing people into the decision making, understanding, yes, we have one final decision maker, but that they all feel like, okay, at least I was heard in where we're going,
Mhm.
I think makes a huge difference in terms of at least giving people the opportunity to come aboard the ship. And if they still don't want to, then that's their decision,
Yeah.
rather than, not allowing them the opportunity to.
Yeah, that frames a different conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
relationships are built and sustained on conversations. Yeah, in my
Mm-hmm.
experience. The quality of the conversation makes a difference, and it's not just me talking at you. It's that there's a dialogue that comes into play here. And I like the point about, I want to have members on the team that are behaving in recognition that they have autonomy, that they are valued, their voice is
Mm-hmm.
valued, and what they're seeing and noticing is valued. And there needs to be guardrails on that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
as we're looking at this whole scaling question. Um, if there's not guardrails, then we've got people running all over the place. So
Right.
yeah, for me, and I'm going to ask you about this in the context of the vision question that a lot of people organize around, because vision is a little bit different than the for the sake of what.
Mm-hmm.
The vision is an external target. For the
Mm-hmm.
sake of what tends to be embodied in the organization itself. It's kind of like who we are gets expressed out there. But that vision, which is pragmatic, it's not abstract, it's something that's out there. That provides a guardrail of sort. How do you have you, and again, you can answer this within the context of MG Media or your work with your clients as they've actually scaled, and the vision changes. Vision will always change over time.
Mm-hmm.
And what's important about vision is not so much what it is. What's important about it is what it does, what it makes possible.
Right.
And it's an aligning principle.
Mm-hmm.
Vision becomes an aligning tool. How have you found either again, with MG Media as you've led it, through its growth cycle here, but also perhaps with clients, the use of vision? How have you actually noticed it being utilized, either well or ill? Hi, I'd like to ask you to do something for me if you wouldn't mind. If you like this episode, I'd like you to not only subscribe on your favorite site, but I'd also like you to give a rating. Ideally, a 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. But I think more importantly also would be just some comments. That helps with the algorithm and it helps build the audience with this. And more than anything else, if you could invite somebody else to listen, just share this episode with a friend, with a colleague. And I'd like to see how we can grow the soul of business. I think it makes a difference. Thanks.
Yeah, I like to think of vision. There's a saying that they say in advertising where your good ad is not just to attract the people you want to attract, but it is to alienate the people that are not meant for your product or service.
Uh-huh.
And so I feel like vision in some ways has functioned to both bring people together as well as move people apart who aren't meant to be working together on the same thing. And so I've found in the past with my own growth that sometimes you keep the vision in your head and you're moving things around and people don't even realize that, oh, I'm actually not aligned with where we're going because things are just pivoting and changing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I started becoming really clear. I have Monday morning meetings with my entire team. And that's where I'm explaining the work that I'm doing, why I'm doing it, where we're going. I try to do that every week now because I don't want people later finding out they're on a path they didn't know they were on.
Uh-huh.
So for me, vision is a way of making sure that everyone that is here wants to be here, is on the same page. We're going to work together. And the clearer you are with it, the clearer you'll get, again, the right people, but also have people move on that aren't meant to be aligned. And things always function better together when we're all aligned. So you want that as clear and as quick as possible.
Yeah. Do you have an example of, without naming names, of a client that has actually done that well as they've grown?
That is a very good question. I do. So I have a client that started off. I have a few clients that sort of have this system, and I think they've all done it well in different ways where they're a practice. So whether therapists, psychiatrists, nurses, they are, one practice that has many different, it's like an octopus with many different legs, many different people that are a part of it. And where they started and what they had to focus on when they were 10, 20, 30 providers to where they're now over 100 is a big difference in terms of how they communicated with their teams. So things were very focused on the individual providers a little bit more at the beginning. And this is where I think, again, vision sometimes loses people and it brings people together. So the autonomy of individual people when organizations are smaller is usually leaned into because, hey, we don't have that many resources. Just keep doing what you know is best. As you grow, you have to maintain the same quality of service, the same, you have to follow the same protocols. It just becomes a little bit of a different beast.
Mm-hmm.
And so allowing people to work together to form what those protocols are, what are our standard operating procedures, what do we emphasize in our services, basically creating a standard that everyone that's now part of this larger organization can follow. I think a lot of our clients have done a really good job at making that clear and allowing the participants, again, providers, therapists, doctors, to be a part of the creation of that. And some people don't like that. Some people have ways they want to do things, and that is great. And then they move on. And other people love the vision, love the direction, and end up being really successful as it continues to grow. So I loved how, like I just said, they incorporated the people who are going to be participating in all the standards in the creation of the standards.
Which goes right directly. I mean, my self-plug here. Yeah, my definition of leadership is influencing others in order to co-create coordinated movement. Mm-hmm. So what you're describing is basically a leader being able to co-create coordinated movement and in doing it without command and control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an influencing component that comes into play here that says, guys, I trust you. Let's see what we can create together here, co-create in this.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea of the for the sake of what, that worthy ideal. Yeah. And this is my soapbox speech here, but
I love it. No, it's so relevant.
yeah, it's people miss, in my experience, and I'm going to just kind of check this out with you here. They confuse vision, this tangible outcome, and it's a tangible, measurable outcome,
Mm-hmm.
with a worthy ideal. And that confusion comes into play where, in my experience, they think that the purpose of that vision is to achieve that objective.
Mm-hmm.
What they lose connection to is that the purpose of any goal is to actually grow. And if the
Mm-hmm.
focus is on achieving the outcome and not paying attention to the dynamic of growth that
Mm-hmm.
might be possible if we're doing this, we end up doing the same thing we did last year, just a different iteration of it, and there's no growth involved with it. Um, have you seen that happen with some of your clients, and how did you interrupt that pattern? Because that's a patterned way of engaging.
Yeah, I see it a lot with leadership too, of where they are giving tasks, directions, strategies, delegating things out, and they're getting questions back. People are saying, "Why I already did this? Why am I doing this again?" And they're getting frustrated because in their minds they're saying, "This doesn't affect your salary. Just do your job. Your job is to do what I ask, and you're going to get paid either way. You're clocked in. Like, go and do what I'm asking you to do. Why should it matter? I
Mhm.
guess." And I found that your goal is not always your employee's goal, right? Everyone has
Almost never.
something different, almost never. um, but that the fact of the matter is that everyone is human, and humans will always care that they're. I mean, I hate to use always, but most of the time will care that they're doing something somewhat worthwhile. That even if it's just I'm collecting a paycheck to feed my family, that there's some kind of purpose to what they're doing. I think that's why you hear about how rates of depression are so low during things like wartime, where everyone feels like they're doing something contributing to
Mhm.
society in some way, right? Stuff like that, where that telling people this is your job, do it and you'll get paid is going to burn them out.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you need to tie, yes, your goal for the larger company is not going to be their goal. What is their goal, and how can you frame what it is you're doing in a way that contributes to that?
Yeah.
Is what
Yeah.
I've tried to do.
There's a distinction, and I've worked this meme a little bit here. But, what's your job and what do you get paid for? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's yeah, it gets to be an interesting
Mm-hmm.
conversation when you can land that in front of an executive team and or a group of employees on a team. What's your job and what do you get paid for? And at the end of the day, when I strip away all of the stuff around that, what I get paid for, ideally, what I get paid for is to grow, and that
Mm-hmm.
translates into the company growing and everything else. And what does growing look like? Well, it takes on a number of different permutations. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
grow in what way? Grow in what area? I get paid to grow. My job is to execute on daily basis, on daily tasks, so that we can actually keep things
Right.
moving on a. This is the procession conversation. We got to keep
Okay.
progressing here. But we split these two apart, and now we've got a different way of engaging and thinking about
Yeah.
how we interact with our employees, number one, but also with our clients. And one of the things that I think you do extraordinarily well and your team does extraordinarily well is the purpose of the interaction is to enable, to speak for myself here, to enable us to grow in ways that we don't currently know how to do things. So that, yeah, we are a completely different company today than we were 5 years ago, 4 years ago. Completely different. Yeah. We go to market differently. We have a different product mix where, I mean, just all kinds of things. And and it hasn't been comfortable. Growth is squeaky.
Yeah.
Growth pinches sometimes. All of a sudden the shoes don't fit anymore. All of those sorts of things. And we needed to execute along the way. So we needed to do the job as well.
Mm-hmm.
With that, and you also mentioned something here about burnout, and I want to just check this. Uh, in my experience, burnout is not a consequence of people working too hard or too frequently or too long. It's a function of losing connection to purpose. Because I will work all day long if it's meaningful to me, and I will feel invigorated by it.
Right.
Does that match pretty much your experience as well?
Yes. No, absolutely. I think it's hard because every job at some point is a job. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'm hearing, that I'm tired, I'm burned out, I'm working too much. And so sometimes it's a matter of prioritization, delegation. How can you not burn yourself out in terms of how can you make good use of your time, good use of your energy so that it's the most productive as possible. So sometimes it's dealing with that, but other times, exactly like you said, it's why am I doing this? I don't even like doing this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it becomes a larger conversation of like, okay, let's talk about why we're doing this. Let's figure out what you want to be doing and if that is still in aligned with what it is we're all doing here together.
Yeah. Have you ever been burned out dancing?
Yes.
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 What got you? Yeah. What got you over that hump?
Oh man, there's like so many different pieces. That's such a good question. It's been a journey with dancing too, because I've been burned out. We've had some of it's just straight taking a 17-hour flight to Sri Lanka and then having to teach for 4 days straight and then flying back. And you come home and you're just like dead. So some of it is just purely the
Physical.
grind of it that
Yeah.
you got, but that's the price to pay for movement and growth and experiences. But for me, it was actually going back to how things are supposed to feel always. So as my partner and I are getting ready for a show, things are always high intensity, lots of hours, and by the time sometimes you get to the show, you're like, you're not even as excited as you were to do it when you started.
Yeah.
But that's part of, I think, the capacity to do that with yourself and like reconnect through noise to why you're doing what you're doing, and always looking at the negative too. What would it be if this weren't here in my life? Because I think
Yeah.
it's really easy to complain about things that are bothering us. What would it be if I didn't get the opportunity to do this? All of a sudden it's different.
Kind of like, oh, okay. And partly the reason I asked that is I wanted it to be kind of a concluding question here, because we started with you talking about uh, a number of times that you've actually found yourself in a position of starting over, as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Now I need to learn something new here.
Mm-hmm.
And for the work that we do on our side of the table here, developing leaders that that recognize that they need to develop the capacity to continuously start over is one of the major keys to continuous success in life.
Yes.
And folks, I just want you to know here, my experience with Marina is that she exemplifies this, and wildly successful, numerous awards, and not just minor awards. I mean, these are significant awards in the space in which her company, MG Media, actually operates. So, where can people find out more about what you're up to and what the company's up to?
We just redid our website to sort of outline our new directions and where we're going for that vision that we can share across externally as well. So mgmediacreative.com, as well as at mgmediacreative on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
All right. I'll have all of that information in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Blaine.
Marina, you have been an incredible guest. Thank you very much. Folks, we've been listening to Marina G., the CEO and founder of MG Media Creative. This has been another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I want to thank you for listening. And as always, in your life and in your business, find ways to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. When you're distributing things out there, and I don't care what it is, but if you're giving it out, just distributing, that's how nature works. Nature is very successful. We don't have an unsuccessful nature going on in this world. We've got successful nature, and it's rooted in giving things away, distribution. So find a way to do that in your life. And until next show, thank you for listening and take care.